February is the hottest month in the Western Cape. It's early in the morning, so there is a slight chill in the air, but the ambulance driver won't even bother with a jacket because he knows once he gets to the scene, he'll be so focused on his patient that the morning chill won't even bug him. It will be the last thing on his mind. They received the call not long ago, and they're racing over to a construction site where they've been escorted by a constable to help out with a girl that was found 15 minutes ago, maybe 20. The driver pulls up, and his partner is already jumping out with his kit and racing to where two security guards are motioning him to come over around with the ambulance. This is odd. This isn't normally how the driver parks at a scene, but no, there they are, motioning for the ambulance to pull around and come closer. So he does. He moves the ambulance around so the group of people and his partner are lit up by the headlights. And they're calling him closer and closer still. He pulls right up to the scene, and there he sees a young woman lying on the ground. Her eyes are so swollen they can barely open up to take in the faces around her. Her lips are cut and bruised and still moving as if she's trying to communicate so desperately with anyone who will listen to her. Her pants are around her ankles, and there is something between her legs. Oh no, she's giving birth. The ambulance driver races out of his seat. He grabs his kit and runs to help his partner, who is already setting up an IV drip and tearing another one open, handing it to him as he fell to his knees on her other side. While he's working, he notices a tattoo on her shoulder, a name, 𝗫𝗫𝗎𝗓𝗓. Is that your name? He asks. She moans. She can't communicate well. Her lips are too swollen for words to come through. So the paramedic continues his work to save the baby. He takes the IV fluid, ready to use it to wash off her legs, and he freezes. It's not a baby coming out of her. It's her intestines. Close your eyes. If you're like me, you're probably a bit of a veteran when it comes to true crime. If you're too much like me, you probably grew up watching it and have a few spicy opinions when it comes to perpetrators and a very strong sense of justice. Originally, I was working on this project for a very long time, and I was gathering my research, and I never actually sat down to record it. But Women for Change has declared a shutdown, a G20 shutdown, on the 21st of November. And it kind of gave me the push that I needed to tell this story because I'm not very good at talking. I stumble over my words a lot. I stutter a lot. Um, Normally, when I listen to true crime, I put it in the background while I'm busy writing or working. That's what I do when I'm writing or busy with something because there's something oddly and terrifyingly familiar about true crime. And I've been listening to murder for such a long time that I don't think humanity can shock or surprise me anymore. that was and what I thought until Anene Boyson. Honestly, she was such a driving force behind this idea for this podcast slash article writing thing that I'm doing now, because her name was one that I could not forget since her murder in 2013. Her name was one that I couldn't get out of my mind. And even though through all of my research, all of my sources kept saying that when it comes to cases that shocked South Africa, Anene Boyson is probably one of the most prolific. But I remember listening to the radio during that time and watching the news and seeing maybe one or two specials, but not a lot of them had to do with Anene Boyson, because tragically, it was not so long after, the day after, that Oscar Pistorius executed his girlfriend. And then there was so little coverage about Anene, and not a lot of people were talking about her. And everyone was talking about, not even Riva, they were talking about Oscar Pistorius. And I wrote the script down in 2024. And now I am recording it in 2025. And the statistics of the rape, murder, and gender based violence of our women, children, and girls has just gone up. So, Anene is such a major driving force behind this podcast, I guess. So, if I stutter, if I mess things up, please excuse all of those mistakes and try to pay attention to the main story, the main driving force of this message. And that is to remember and honor the women, children, and girls that are being afflicted by this epidemic. Anene's story is very different from Riva's. It's kind of mirrored. Riva Steenkamp grew up in a loving home with loving parents, and she was surrounded by family. Anene was a little bit different. I think maybe either because we were closer in age at the time, maybe, but her story just really got stuck in my head since 2013. And because, like I said, I am a bit of a veteran when it comes to true crime. Humanity has done great and amazing things, but most of the time, I'm kind of the opinion that people kind of suck. So, in all my years of delving into true crime cases, there are maybe four that really have struck a nerve and where I felt, I don't know, like a hollowness and a sorrow that goes a little bit deeper than sadness, because you mourn not only for the person, but you mourn for the loss of humanity, because you wonder, how can you people be so cruel to someone else? Anene's wasn't the first one, or was the first one where it really struck home for me. The first one where not only did I realize that people can be really, truly awful to someone, be it a stranger or someone they've known their whole life, but it's where I realized that South Africa really had an issue when it came to violence against women. And it was incredibly frustrating because Anene was not the first woman to be assaulted and murdered on South African soil. And unless things change or something is done, she unfortunately won't be the last. And I want to tell you her story, or what I could find about her story. So, like I said, Anene was mirrored to Riva. She had a very rough start to life. She was born on the 30th of October in 1995 She had an older brother named Reno and a sister who I don't think is named. Now, Anine and her family lived out in the middle of nowhere, far away from big towns and big cities, and many townspeople entertained themselves by going to local bars, pubs, shebeens, and they entertained themselves by drinking a lot. It's common. Alcohol is a popular companion to have in towns. It's a popular companion to have at home. And in poorer townships, it is sometimes accompanied with drugs like tick, which is crystal meth, heroin, and some other drugs. And it was so normal for Anine and her siblings to be raised in a household where their mother found a friend in alcohol and drugs. Their father worked on a farm, and to be honest, he wasn't a big fixture in their lives or concerned with their well being or welfare. Some reports say that Anine and her brother were taken away from her mother when Anine was 3 years old, and in 1998 they were placed with 𝗪𝗖𝗎𝗎𝗓𝗧𝗓 and her husband. It was supposed to be for a short 6-month period, but Anine's mother never came back for her children, and eventually Anine and her brother moved to 𝗪𝗡𝗓𝗧𝗏 with 𝗪𝗓𝗡𝗀. I'm not sure what happened to her sister, but I think she was placed somewhere else. And even after South African Children's Welfare took Anine and her siblings away from Anine's biological mother, she never stopped having children, and she was arrested in 2008 for the culpable homicide of one of her kids. Already you can see that life has not been easy for Anine. And maybe she was hoping that living with her new foster mother and maybe living in a new town, things would get better. Except 𝗪𝗧𝗎 entertained the same friends that Anine's bio mom did. And she often spent her time drinking and would even sometimes chase Anine away to her friend's house so she could entertain other company for the evening. I do want to give a quick side note here. Foster parents aren't uncommon in South Africa, especially in farming towns or middle of nowhere towns like the Free State or Bloemfontein. At least when I was growing up, I don't know about now. Parents would move to bigger cities like Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, like more central cities for better opportunities to better provide for their children and families. And then they would send money back home to the aunties and uncles helping look after their kids. Of course, not all the money went to the kids because I'm sure some relatives wanted to be compensated for their time and effort, and some were just greedy and used the money for booze and other bad habits. Like I said, people suck. Um, but you kind of hope for the best for your kids. And some, I'm sure, like 𝗪𝗓𝗎𝗓, weren't compensated at all, and everyone was just trying their best. Now, in farming towns and small towns like 𝗪𝗓𝗧𝗏, education is provided in public schools. And because South Africa does not take care of faraway public facilities, it was probably not as supportive of its students as other schools, especially of Anine, who was battling in school. It was said that she battled to read, and her reading was at a level that was 3 grades lower than what it should be. I'm sure getting chased out of her home every night and often enough that she moved in with a friend from 2009 until early 2013 affected her learning as well. And with no parental figures to encourage and support her to pursue education, and even in towns like that where education is not, I don't know how to say it, supported, um, Anine likely felt that education and school wasn't for her, and she wouldn't go further when it came to her schooling. So she dropped out at 15 years old. I don't know why she moved back to her foster mother's house, but Anine moved home in early 2013. And by now, she probably was a completely different child than what 𝗪𝗎𝗓 knew. Her family had said that Anene was very shy and she was very quiet. She was timid and liked staying home rather than going out. But things were different now. She was 17 years old and she wanted to hang out with her friends. 𝗪𝗎𝗓 was surprised when on the 1st of February 2013, a Friday night, Anene said she would be going to the local pub and bar with her friends. 𝗪𝗎𝗓 said yes, but she had to be home by 10 p.m. Another side note here, the legal drinking age in South Africa is 18. And trust me when I say that not a lot of people, especially teenagers, are following this law with an iron fist, especially in a busy one-town bar that is flocked, chock and block with people, because the state or prosecution, I forget who, during the court asked why Anene was allowed in the bar in the first place. And that's such a stupid question to ask because honestly, who's asking for these kids' IDs? They don't have a bouncer at this one town pub. And if they don't ID you in Cape Town, why would they ID you in 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪? Anyway, I think why Anene's case hit me so deep is because of how similar she was to many other women and girls that I know. She was similar to me. Like so many others, she was probably excited to spend time with her friends and so excited to get out of the house for a little while, and probably even had a little skip in her step as she made her way over to her friend's house, wondering if she was going to dance tonight or probably how hungover she was going to be tomorrow, or if maybe she was going to see someone cute tonight. Anene got to her friend's house to pregame, to drink a little, and warm up for what she was hoping for would be an exciting Friday night. Between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. on the 2nd of February, Anene and her friends left the house party and made their way to the busy bar. It was filled with people from the party, some other familiar faces, and even an old face of Anene's childhood friend, Jonathan Davids, or as she knew him, 𝗬𝗎, and one of his new friends who Anene thought was pretty cute, Johannes Kana, especially in the striped hat that he was wearing. The night was going so well for Anene. She was having a good time with her friends, and as the drinks were flowing, she even got up the courage to talk to her crush. They were flirting back and forth, sharing secret smiles. Anene probably felt butterflies in her chest when he put his arm around her. And then it turned sour. After 1 a.m., 𝗪𝗎𝗓 and a friend stumbled across the street, frustrated and angry that Anene had missed her curfew. Anene could tell that 𝗪𝗎𝗓 had been drinking, and 𝗪𝗎𝗓 and her friend just saw Kana's arms around Anene. An argument erupted between the mother and daughter, after which Anene told 𝗪𝗎𝗓 that she was going to come home when she was good and ready. Now, I'm getting flashbacks because I've had the exact same argument with my mom before, and I'm sure I said those words verbatim to my mother before she dragged my drunk ass home. Anene and her friends were winding down for the night. Between 2 and 3 a.m., Anene's friends had seen her walking down towards the construction site where a company in 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗪 were building some RPD housing cottages, and that was the last time they had seen Anene. Now, as women, we know never to leave our friends alone. I can't tell you when it was ingrained in me, and I can't tell you how old I was when I first was told that you never go to the bathroom alone. It's like part of a checklist we all go through. You never let a woman go somewhere alone, sober or drunk. It's not a thing that we do. So it's something for me to try to understand I don't understand why none of Aneen's friends urged her to come with them or why none of them stayed with Aneen. I think everyone knew that Aneen wanted to go to the construction site to maybe be alone with her boyfriend. But even then, it was such an unsafe situation, and maybe it could have been prevented had her friends been a little bit more protective of her. And I'll expand on this a little bit later. Most construction sites have hired security. There are expensive equipment that are left on site, some tools and items that can be easily stolen and resold for a higher price. Listen, if you have it, it can be stolen, either resold, purposed here in South Africa. So security is needed. And at 3:35, Fury left his little security guard hut and began his patrol route. He checked the alleyways, he walked away from the hut, looking left and right as he went, and continued his path, following his route all along the site, noting that there was nothing strange or out of the ordinary. At 4:10, circling back towards his hut and still checking the little passageways that separated the houses, Fury came to a stop. He heard a low sound, a gasp, a moan followed in the early morning darkness, soft and barely audible, but the security guard followed it. The moans are low and soft, and with his flashlight, where his route had first begun, he sees a woman lying between two cottages, shaking and probably terrified, wondering if the people who had hurt this girl were still close by. He radioed in for his supervisor. His supervisor arrives and tells Fury to call the police and emergency services, while he debates with himself whether or not to go to the girl, or if doing so would disrupt the crime scene. He began to see injuries on the girl. She was laying on her back, her face was badly beaten and starting to swell up. 2 police constables arrived on the scene within 15 minutes after being called and approached the girl. When one of the constables crouched down, she tried to stand up and talk to them, but her legs collapsed out from underneath her and she fell onto her stomach. She was incoherent and mumbling, her lips swollen and bloody from being hit. She was saying that she was tired and sore, and that was when the severity of her injuries was discovered, and the constable left, hoping to run into emergency services on the way so they could be guided to the scene faster. The girl was badly beaten, bloody, and had bruises all over. Blood and sand covered her arms and legs from between her legs, and hanging out from her vagina by a meter was her intestine. The ambulance arrived between 4:30 and 4:45, and the paramedics immediately got to work. The driver of the ambulance had to testify during court that he had to pull around the housing and pull right up to the scene so they could work under the headlights. One paramedic administered a drip and used the contents of another IV bag so they could clean up the protruding intestine and try to put it back inside of her. While they worked, they saw a tattoo on her shoulder, a script that said Aneen Boyson. They gathered Aneen up onto the stretcher, finding a striped hat nearby her body and placing it with her as they put her into the ambulance and took her to 𝗬𝗢𝗎𝗧 Hospital in InBredasdorp with a police escort, leaving the scene to be secured by the 2 security officers. After IDing Aneen, the police most likely went to 𝗪𝗔𝗔𝗎𝗪's residence and told her that they'd found Aneen. They brought her over to the hospital, and Aneen burst into tears when she saw 𝗪𝗔𝗎𝗪 calling out to her, my mom, help me," in Afrikaans. 𝗪𝗔𝗎𝗪 held her kid crying. She was probably so angry and scared and demanded to know who hurt her. Aneen Boyson had reportedly said Zwei and his friends. 𝗪𝗓𝗡 had probably told the police this and went home. I'm not sure why she would go home and not wait at the hospital. Maybe it's because it was an active crime scene investigation. Maybe she wasn't allowed to be there. Maybe Anene was in surgery and maybe it was no good waiting for her while she was in surgery. No one knows why she went home. So it's already been established that 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪 is a small town. So most likely, 𝗪𝗡𝗪 Hospital didn't have the facilities to deal with Anene's extensive injuries, and she was transferred to another hospital 2 hours away. I don't know why they didn't airlift this poor girl. I don't know why they drove there. Not that it matters, because once she arrived at this hospital, it was determined that Anene needed to be seen by a specialist surgeon to try and save her intestine and her life, and she was transferred to Tygerberg Hospital, another hour away. Once she was at Tygerberg Hospital, Dr. Taylor, I think she's the specialist surgeon, I'm not 100% sure, walked into Anene's room at 1700 hours p.m. to begin her assessment. She said she was hit with the smell of decay and decomposition after examining what I'm assuming might still be the protruding intestine. It was determined to be Anene's colon and small intestine, and that an important piece of the intestinal organ that provides blood flow was missing, and without it, the organ was starting to die and it could not be saved. Upon further assessment, it was discovered that Anene's perineum, the tiny patch of sensitive skin between one's genitals, i.e., the vaginal opening or scrotum and the anus, had been destroyed. And without it, there was nothing protecting her from the bacteria from fecal matter, and infection had begun to spread. They tried to stabilize her, but the injuries to her insides were too extensive, and infection probably played a role too, and her organs began to shut down. While 𝗪𝗪𝗡 was being driven to Tygerberg Hospital to see Anene, she unfortunately would not make it in time for her passing. Anene Boysen passed away at 2100 hours on the 2nd of February 2013. She was 17 years old. The investigation started pretty quickly, and other units were called in to assist 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪 Police Department because I think they realized that they were a bit out of their depth, and different theories started coming into play. A popular one was that Anene was dumped at the site because there was not a lot of blood found at the scene. But that theory was ruled out because the wine glass that she was using at the bar was found smashed at the scene. Plus blood, tissue, and the missing piece of Anene's intestine that would provide blood flow to her organ was found at the scene. So it kind of locked in that this is where the attack happened. Another theory that was tossed around was that because there was this steel pipe, lots of large sticks and rocks found with blood on at the scene, investigators thought that maybe they were used on Anene and it would explain her extensive injuries. But for some reason, they were not called into evidence during the court proceeding. I'm not sure why. I can't tell you. It's just shoddy police work on their part. Or shoddy, what is the word? Court proceedings. I can't tell you why it wasn't used in court. I have no idea if it was even collected. While the police were busy with forensics, gathering intel, and collecting evidence, most likely including Anene's clothes and including the striped hat that the ambulance driver put on the stretcher with Anene, they began assessing her body for autopsy. A little trigger warning here because the wounds that Anene sustained were severe and extensive. If you're looking for a full on deep dive into this case, including court rulings, uh, a huge source for me was Nicole Engelbrecht's podcast, True Crime South Africa. I used it as a huge research guide, especially when it came to the court rulings and Anene's injuries, because her court documents are not available to the public. So a major shout out to True Crime South Africa and Nicole. I really love their podcast. Her podcast, sorry. I really love her podcast. Anene had sustained heavy bruising along her face and body due to a brutal beating. Her eyes were so blue and bruised that they were swollen shut. Her lips were swollen, cut, and bloody due to the beating, and blood was leaking from one ear. Anene's colon and small intestine were found outside of her body and hanging out of her vaginal cavity by a meter. Her perineum was destroyed. Her vaginal and anal areas had been put through so much trauma that her insides were said to be pulverized and were likely the result from blunt force destruction. Doctors even theorized that Anene's intestines could have been pulled out by hand. The damage to Anene was so severe that doctors weren't able to tell if it was done by one or multiple attackers, and it was difficult to extract DNA samples due to her injuries. The lead investigator was an officer called in from Hermanus, and she works in the sexual defense unit. And from a collection of eyewitness accounts from the bar, it was determined that Kana, who was wearing the striped hat, was the last person to see Anene alive, despite some of her friends, Anene's friends, who, now knowing what happened to their friend and knowing she was with him, they lied to investigators and covered for him, with one of them saying that she walked home with them. Just a side note, by the way. This is why I said earlier that I wish they were a little bit more protective of Anene. But regardless of what Anene's friends had said, the investigator had enough information to know that Kana was the last person to see Anene that night. So on Sunday, the 3rd of February 2013, she went to his house to interview him. He admitted to being with Anene that night, but told the investigator that he saw the argument with Anene and 𝗪𝗧𝗎𝗓 and even called out to her foster mom and a friend to take Anene home because the girl was drunk. Last he saw her, he left Anene outside of the pub and left the bar alone. While he was speaking, the detective noticed that his ear was cut. She asked him what happened, and he said he didn't know. She also noticed that he was wearing long sleeves in February and pulling the sleeves over his hands. And like I said already, February is one of the hottest months in the Western Cape, so it was a bit weird that he was wearing long sleeves in 30-degree weather. The investigator asked to see his hands, and when he pulled back his sleeves, his knuckles were scuffed and bruised, like he'd been in a fight. He couldn't account for those injuries either. He was also asked about the striped hat that he had been seen wearing that night. Kana said he had never seen it before. By now you're wondering about the name Anene mentioned on her deathbed, the name of her friend that she had also seen at the bar, and one of the people Anene had claimed had attacked her that night. 𝗬𝗢𝗡𝗧. Jonathan Davids, aka 𝗦𝗢𝗡𝗧, was of course one of the first people questioned. He stated that he had seen Anene that night. She had hit his head, smiled, and said that she was there too. He said he left the pub at 12 a.m. and went home. I can't find any accounts that can confirm or deny his claims, but I should note that he had scuff marks on his hands too. But he says it was from being in a fight the day before Anene's attack. It's a bit muddy, and I'll explain why some of these sources, even though I did put them in my source file, they're a little unreliable. When Monday, the 4th of February 2013 came around, the media grabbed a hold of the story and turned it into a bit of a circus. There are still articles to this day that exaggerate Aneen's injuries because I remember reading stories way back then of how her legs were broken, her hands were broken, how her throat was cut. And that is not true. That's not what happened. There were articles that said Aneen's stomach was cut and that her intestines were pulled out through the wound, and that's not true either. There were articles stating that different objects had been used on Aneen, but there were no reports to confirm these statements. A lot of headlines also stated that Aneen had been gang raped, but this is most likely because of Aneen's last words and because a nurse claimed to have heard Aneen say that 5 to 6 men had attacked her. But I can't say with full confidence that Aneen did say this, just like I can't say that Aneen was or wasn't gang raped. I don't know. The articles, the news never confirmed this either. The police work never confirmed this either. No one except for Aneen and the person or people who hurt her know. All I know is that Aneen was in a lot of pain, and in that moment, she just wanted her mom. On the 8th of February 2013, 3 men were arrested in connection to Anene Boyson's rape and murder. Jonathan's wife Davids, her friend or ex-boyfriend according to some articles, but as I said, they aren't the most reliable sources. Johannes Kana, the man she had a crush on, and an unnamed man. On the 10th of February, Kana confessed to being with Anene that night. He said that they'd been drinking a lot and flirting all night and walked to the construction site 250 meters away to get a little bit of privacy. They started kissing and he wanted to take it further. Anene rejected him and he lost his temper and began to beat her. Anene was a fighter, so he knocked her onto the ground where he kicked her until she lost consciousness and wouldn't fight him anymore. And he raped her. He is quoted as saying, "I raped Anene, but I didn't kill her." There was not enough evidence to charge anyone else with the rape and murder of Anene Boyson, so all other suspects were released, and in June of 2013, Kana pled guilty to the rape of Anene Boyson and not guilty to her murder. In October of 2013, he was found guilty of both the rape and murder of Anene Boyson. And on the 30th of October, what would have been Anene's 18th birthday, he was handed 2 life sentences. I'm not going to talk about the trial because there wasn't much news coverage about it, and honestly, I have no idea how South Africa's judicial system works. Um, because it is a little bit of a circus all on its own, and if it and I I'm just I'm speechless because the police work was terrible. The court was terrible. Like I mentioned, Nicole said that the court documents are locked away. And I just hope that he stays in jail forever and he will have to answer to God when his time comes. And again, if you do want a deeper look at that, I recommend Nicole's podcast. I wish Anene's tragedy ended there, but unfortunately, it looks like her loss opened some kind of evil gate at Bredasdorp, and the little town had to deal with more losses and more tragedies. In 2014, Anene's foster mother, 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓, who really struggled to cope with Anene's loss, died from cancer. A few months later, her biological father was found murdered and dumped in a dumping site just outside of 𝗪𝗧𝗡𝗧. In 2014, the South African government decided to honor Anenebecame memory by building an advanced skills community center in hopes of encouraging the youth to learn new skills and trades so they don't have to turn to drugs and alcohol, and hopefully help the youth study further and better the education in 𝗪𝗧𝗡𝗧. But as of 2018, the facility has not been opened and remains closed due to insufficient funds. Uh, as of today, me recording this, there has been no update on this community center. The community was not shocked by the rape of Anenebecame, but they were surprised isn't the right word, but I'll use it here as a placeholder, because one of the many women that were interviewed was quoted as saying that Anene only needed to be raped. They didn't need to murder her. That was what one of the interviewees said. And since Anene's rape and murder, 𝗪𝗧𝗡𝗧 had had a string of kidnappings, rapes, and murders of young girls and women. A 5-year-old named Katie Williams in 2015. In the same year, a 15-year-old girl named Alda Japta. In 2016, a 23-year-old woman named Solnita Mano was found in a public area, and in 2018, 200 meters from where Anene was found, 16-year-old Jodine Peters was raped and murdered in a similar fashion. And despite the march that they did for Anene and the outcry South Africa did for Anene and Riva and all the other women and girls that followed, nothing has been done to make our girls, our women, our children safer. A lot of articles, documentaries, and resources that I read, 9 times out of 10, I guarantee you that drugs and alcohol will come up as a reason and an excuse as to why these rapes and murders keep happening in towns like 𝗪𝗧𝗡𝗧. Even the person that raped Anene said that he was hopelessly drunk and that's why he hurt Anene. But he still did it deliberately. So, and this is just my personal opinion, for me it really gets my blood boiling, because drugs and alcohol may lower your inhibitions, but they don't affect your intentions. There are millions of alcoholics and drug users in South Africa and billions all across the world, and they do not murder, rape, and kidnap and kill. And I, for one, think that there is something in South Africa where people think that they are entitled to own, hurt, and get something from children, girls, and women. And once we address that mentality of thinking that people owe you something, maybe we can keep our daughters, our mothers, our sisters, and our friends safe. Part of me thinks it's education, learning the basics of yes and no, learning that you are worth more than what people make of you, learning that you are capable of great and incredible things. And once you realize that, you will see that violence and anger and hatred will only ruin and taint things around you. Another part of me really just does not understand the entitlement that people think they are owed, and why the safety of others has to be jeopardized for that entitlement. And that is where I'm going to end Anene's story. Thank you so much for joining me for the first story of Her Name Was. Her name was Anenebecame, and I would be so grateful to you if you would join me in remembering her. Please stay safe, please be kind and remember that your words and you mean something. I am your host, Kara, and I will see you again soon. Bye. Again, I want to give a huge shout out to Women for Change South Africa and the G20 summit lie down and march that is taking place on the 21st of November 2025. For 15 minutes, we are asking women to lie down and basically shut down the economy and just show the impact that women have on society in South Africa. There will also be a whole bunch of organizations, resource links. If you need help or if you know someone that needs help, they'll be in the description as well. If you would rather read Anin's story, I will post the script and the timeline to a place, either Wattpad and my website and wherever else I can, just to spread Anin's story even more. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Again, I am sorry for any stuttering or mumbling or messing up of the words, and I hope that you can overlook that and focus more on Anin's story. Once again, please stay safe, please look after yourself, and I hope you will join me again soon. Bye.